Okay, we are being live streamed. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's A Month of Service presentation of divorce and what to expect. My name is Nia Murray. I am the programs coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. Also included is the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods, and joining us today, we have Ms. Myra Hippolyte. Also, on behalf of our presenting partner with the Houston Bar Association, we have Mr. Mark Yablon with Yablon Law, PLLC, who will be presenting information on divorce and what to expect. I also want to make sure that I include or give the introduction of our A Month of Service partners, which also include, again, the Houston Bar Association, the Earl Carl Institute, Harris Central Appraisal District, Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office, and Houston Volunteer Lawyers and Lone Star Legal Aid. And together, all 8 of our organizations make up A Month of Service. And basically, Month of Service is a collaboration of all 8 of us. We come together on a monthly basis and offer a variety of different workshops, resources, and information to the Houston and Harris County and surrounding communities relative to community empowerment, asset building, asset protection, and the maintaining of generational wealth. We know that there are a lot of underserved communities out there that we all service collaboratively. So we wanted to create a larger impact and come together and try to get as much information out to as many people as we possibly can in regards to different civil legal matters that people need information about or don't know where to go to get information or assistance. Also, for those that are having issues, any civil legal or in need of any civil legal assistance, then we'll provide them with the information and the resources of where to go to get the assistance that they may need. But the month of service offers, again, a variety of different workshops every month. If there are any workshops that we do not currently include, then please make sure that you reach out to myself or to Ms. Myra so that we can work on getting it on the schedule if the information is pertinent to you all and the communities that we serve. Also, this is an opportunity for you to ask whatever questions that it is that you may have in regards to divorce and what to expect throughout the divorce process. However, please keep in mind that we are on a public platform. We are recording this session. We are also broadcasting live on Facebook, on our social media platform at Amos Houston TX on social media, and ask that you try to keep your questions to be as general as you possibly can so that your personal detail information is not getting out there for everyone to actually have access to. However, we do encourage you to reach out to our legal service partners or to the presenter if you have yourself find yourself in need of any specific legal assistance, as this information, it is for educational purposes only, and it's not to be considered legal advice. So do please keep that in mind. Again, however, you have the opportunity to ask questions, type your questions into the chat box, or you can wait until the end and unmute yourself and ask directly. Or if you are joining us on Facebook, please feel free to type your questions into the comment section and I'll make sure that it gets read aloud there as well. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and move on into our introductions and get into our presentation. So Ms. Myra, would you like to introduce yourself first, and we'll have Mr. Yablon and introduce himself, and we'll move right along.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Myra Hippolyte, and I work with the City of Houston Department of Neighborhoods. On behalf of Mayor John Whitmire and Director Herbert Sims, we want to welcome you to the Month of Service Partnership. This partnership is all about making sure we're giving back free information to the Houston, Harris County, state of Texas community. We want to make sure that you know that you're not alone, that through whatever stressor you're going through in your life, that you have a team of partners that is here to help you throughout whatever process you're going through. Guys, one of the most interesting part about this process is that all our virtual workshops are for informational purposes only and not legal advice. Now, Nia and I would love to say, yes, we know everything. And at times we act like we know everything, but we don't. And that's why we leave it for the legal experts. But even if we have a legal expert giving you information, they are not giving you legal advice until you actually sign a form with them and agreed that they are our attorney. Right now, all our professional experts are here also to give you give you information for informational purposes only and not legal advice. Guys, thank you so much. Have a great day. And what a beautiful day. So I am going to sneak out and go get something to eat because you know what? I'm going to walk outside and breathe a little. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe.
Hi,
All right.
Myra.
Thank you. All right, go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Nia. Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Mark Yablon, and I have a law firm called, amazingly enough, Yablon Law. I'm over on in the AIG complex on Allen Parkway between River Oaks and downtown Houston, and I have a statewide practice that involves family law, divorce, etc. So, enough of that. I went through a surprise unrequested divorce more than 10 years ago, and that journey took me down the road of becoming a career changer and going to law school in my 50s. So for any of you that are possibly going to go through a divorce, I wish you the best, but there's a opening at the other end. For those of you that are thinking about it, I hope that you and your spouse can find a way not to file for divorce. My opinion is that if two people fall in love, get married, do life together, and fall out of love, that under most circumstances, but not all, they can choose to fall back into love. But the problem with my philosophy is it only takes one to tango. They always say it takes two to tango, but in divorce, it only takes one person not to want to get not to stay married. My pastor in my old church said that he used to counsel people going through divorce, and eventually he got to the point of saying, if there is a way to save this marriage, are you willing to do whatever it will take? And he said that sometimes people would go, no. And he said at that point, he would say, then there's really nothing that I can do to help you. And the sad reality is both of you need to want to stay in that marriage. Now, if anybody has questions, please feel free to write it in the chat section, and I will do my best to answer your questions. So I think that if you're contemplating a divorce, you should really think hard about why is it that you want the divorce? Is it something temporary, or is it something long-term, or that has been going on for a long time? If there's any hope of saving that marriage and both of you want to save it, then it's worth saving, or you wouldn't have got into the marriage in the first place. But if you believe that there is no hope for the marriage, I would encourage you to talk to a counselor, your spiritual leader, and ultimately, if those avenues don't work, talk to a divorce attorney. And in talking to the attorney, which is what I can address, you want to be able to find an attorney that is compassionate, knowledgeable, will listen to you, is affordable, and will help you meet your objectives. If the attorney never asks you questions, I would be concerned about that. If the attorney has all the answers before you ever open your mouth, I would be concerned about that. That said, I'm here to give a presentation on divorce, so of course I'm going to be talking about things that I think apply to a lot of people, but it may not apply to anybody in particular that is on this Zoom call or Facebook Live call. All right, so let's talk about the process. Well, you could represent yourself in what's called pro se, P-R-O space S-E, I believe, pro se, and you can spend a lot of time and learn the law all you want. You can get on Chat GPT, and maybe even it may even hallucinate some great answers for you. But going through a divorce pro se can be a very time-consuming and difficult process. If you pretty much have no children, have no assets, then you should be able to go to legal aid societies, like Lone Star Legal Aid possibly, or use forms that the Texas Supreme Court has produced to pretty much get a simple divorce and be done in 60 days. If you want to go that route, I would encourage you to contact one of the legal aid societies and see if they could help you for free. If they can't or won't, then I would, and you still want to represent yourself, or you can't afford to pay a lawyer, I would go down to the Harris County or Montgomery County, whatever county that you're in, if you're watching, go to their courthouse, and they should have, at least in Texas, they should have a law library with a law librarian. And the law librarian cannot give you legal advice, but the law librarian can point you to the forms that have been created by the Texas Supreme Court to help low-income people with, particularly with no children and little to no assets, get a divorce so that they can move on with their lives and not be tied to somebody they don't want to be with anymore. If you decide that you want to hire an attorney and you can afford it, then what you should do is find an attorney that does family law, as I described earlier. And that attorney, if it were me, I would take you through the process of going through a divorce, which includes you should talk to your spouse if you're able to, and talk to your spouse about your desire to become divorced. If it is that detrimental, most likely your spouse has already had these conversations with you. But once you've made up your mind to do it, you should absolutely talk to your spouse first. Surprising your spouse with a lawsuit for divorce and having your spouse served at work or at your kid's school when he or she is picking up the children or dropping them off, to me, is a horrible idea, at least not without first trying to do it in an amicable way. Because no matter how upset you are with that other person, now you have to change your hat. You have to change your objective. Your objective is not revenge, is not to be mean. Your objective is to get divorced from this person. So what is the best way you can do it with this other person not creating difficulty in your life any further? And one is to show some respect toward that other person by giving them the opportunity to agree to the divorce up front. So you've hired your attorney, you've decided you're going to go through the divorce, and then you're going to let your spouse know that this is what you want. And your attorney will be able to draft documents where basically it's a release where your spouse, you could ask your spouse, hey, sign this form that says you don't have to be served at work or, at the kid's school or wherever, and that you agree to letting this divorce process go forward. Some people might sign it, some may not. Some people may have such a bad relationship with their spouse that they will, with a spouse that they are afraid to even talk to the person. And I can certainly appreciate how difficult that could be. Okay, so then let's say the person agrees or the person doesn't agree. The next step is that your attorney will draft what's called a petition, petition, petition. And in that petition, you're telling the court, I married this person on this date. We have children. We don't have children. We've been living in Harris County, if that's the case, for typically for a minimum of 6 months, and we want to be divorced. If you have children, you will put in that petition, I want full custody of my child or children. I want partial custody. I want 50-50 custody, whatever it is that you want. asking for full custody is a difficult proposition, and difficult means expensive. But if there is a compelling reason in your mind that your spouse is a horrible parent, or more importantly, a danger to your child or children, well, then you talk with your attorney and you both may decide to request full custody. You may not want custody of your children, or you may think your spouse is a better parent for the benefit of your children. And if that's the case, that's okay too. And in that case, you would say you definitely would want to have a conversation with your spouse to make sure that that's what you all agree to, that the spouse would be the primary parent. I'm not going to get into much about child custody or child support, because it's my understanding that next presentation, I believe it might be next week, is by an attorney talking about those subjects. So we'll move on. In that petition, you'll talk about that. Generally, you'll say, we expect to agree on the division of property, but if we can't, we will then ask the court to make that determination. And you'll file the petition. Typically, within a couple of weeks, you should have what's called a temporary orders hearing. And at that temporary orders hearing, both attorneys will, or pro se's, litigants will explain to the court why they want certain temporary orders. So what could be in those temporary orders? Well, again, there's just a whole wealth of scenarios out there that I wouldn't have time to go into, but generally speaking, the scenario may be, I want my spouse to be kicked out of the house. I believe my spouse is dangerous to me. I believe my spouse is annoying to me, whatever the case may be. I want alimony, or they don't call it alimony in Texas, but I want spousal support because I've been a homemaker for the last 35 years or 15 years, as the case may be, and I need some money to live on so that I can go get myself educated, find a job, or whatever the case may be. Assuming you have checking and retirement accounts, there will be temporary orders that will say you can't get rid of your retirement plan. You can't sell your car. Might even limit how much money you can spend. But you want to have all that in the temporary orders so that you can protect your property values. The next thing is you will, the court will file an order that says everything that the court thinks is right and just for each of you. If you and your spouse can be on agreement on everything else, then within 60 days, or excuse me, after 60 days, the court could have a final hearing and sign a final decree that says you're divorced. If you can't agree on everything or on something, then there could be a lot of court fights between the time of your temporary orders and the time of your final decree. Could be that so one of you is violating the temporary orders and the other spouse wants to take you to court and say, Judge, make him or her stop doing X. And speaking of which, during this divorce process, please do yourself a huge favor and do not date anyone. I've heard a variety of people say, well, we're getting divorced, who cares? And I've heard of judges that say, you're right, who cares? But I can tell you from experience of at least one judge somewhere in Texas who severely penalized the spouse who was dating someone during the divorce. And even though that dating went on after, or that dating started after the divorce was filed by the other spouse, the spouse that dated someone during the divorce got financially penalized unbelievably and dramatically so. And so had I, if I were starting with a client in the very beginning of a divorce consideration, I would tell them, don't date anybody. Don't even try. Don't go online on social media and put information out there. Nobody in the world should know what you're thinking other than your attorney during the divorce process, particularly. All right, so eventually there will be a final order. It may be an agreed final order, which is a lot cheaper and quicker and less stressful most of the time. But there's a time and place to fight, either to defend against what the spouse wants or to request what you think you should get. And you could have a trial. And a trial could be half a day. It could be all day. It could be 3 days, 2 weeks. It just depends on what your situation is. Once the final order comes out, that final order will say you're divorced. Spouse, the wife gets, these assets, the husband gets those assets, and have a good day. If there are children involved, then it gets more complicated with child support and custody issues. But again, I'll leave that for the next speaker to address. You also could get an order that you think is just crazy, wrong. The judge or the jury missed it. And by the way, Texas is unique. As I understand it, it's the only state in the union that allows a jury trial for divorce matters. That's my understanding. But I do know in Texas, you can have a jury or you can ask the judge to make a ruling. So you get a ruling and you don't like it. Then what do? Well, you can appeal it by going, if you're in Harris County, in this whole region, there's the First Court of Appeals in downtown Houston, and they share a building with the 14th Court of Appeals in downtown Houston. And these courts have multiple justices on it, and 3 of them sit on what's called a panel. Just think of a desk with 3 people sitting there. And instead of one judge, these 3 justices, as they're called, will look over your record that happened during your divorce, and they may order the judge to change her mind. They may order the judge to do nothing and affirm it. Or in some cases, the court might say the judge got it so wrong and it's so easy, we're going to correct it and tell the judge to make these specific corrections. If that appeals process doesn't go well, there's one more appellate process, and that's going to the Texas Supreme Court. But unlike the First and 14th Court of Appeals, which have no discretion to hear your case, meaning they have to hear your appeal and make a ruling, the Texas Supreme Court can say there's no there and not have a hearing and basically affirm what the appellate court has decided. So you've gone through the divorce, you've got a final order, you've either appealed it or you haven't appealed it, but ultimately there's this 10 to 30 pages of document that says you're divorced, and now what comes afterward? You might have, let's pray, peace and harmony. You might have even more strife, either you or your ex. And if the strife is bad enough, one of you may end up hiring an attorney to do what's called an enforcement action. And that is to go back to court and say, my spouse was supposed to turn over the house to me and he didn't. My spouse was supposed to pay me $3,000 a month in spousal support. He hasn't paid in the last 35 days or 60 days. And you ask the court to order the spouse to do that again, with the threat of additional fines and possibly even jail time if they don't take care of the business that they were ordered to do. if you were ordered to receive child support, or if there's child custody, or if you're to receive spousal support, or potentially something else that's an ongoing event, you might be able to go back to court and request what's called a modification. And you ask the judge to reevaluate everything that's happened since the final order and how you need more spousal support. Or if you're the one paying the spousal support, why you should not have to pay any more any spousal support anymore, because circumstances have changed. One other thing to keep in mind is keep good records before marriage, when you're married, and if you end up going through a divorce, because you may have inherited money from your parents or grandparents or someone else. That's your money that shouldn't be subject to a divorce. But if you don't have good records that show that that money was given to you before marriage, or even if it was given to you in marriage through an inheritance, if you don't have good records that can prove that, then that money is going to be divided with your spouse. Now, it is 1:33. I could keep going, but I'd like to answer any questions that anyone that's watching or listening to this has, so that I don't just drone on and on and on something that you might not be interested in. So I invite anyone to ask questions.
I don't have any that are in the chat just yet, and I don't have any on Facebook.
Okay. If there are no questions, and we'll wait a few minutes. Nia, do you have anything that you would like me to cover that I forgot or didn't think was important, that you think might be actually of interest to people?
Not as of yet. I don't want to really kind of go into my questions just yet until you actually cover everything, or in case you actually say it throughout your presentation. So I don't want to kind of throw you off track of your order of things.
Right. So I always like to have audience feedback, because let me say it a different way. When I'm in the audience, I like to ask questions and find out what I'm interested in, because what I'm interested in, other people, the speaker, may not realize that.
Well, let me ask this. I've heard, or I have witnessed, I have seen where there are a lot of men that seem to get the short end of the stick when it comes to divorce and custody and child support and alimony and things of that nature. What's a man to do? I want to be the devil's advocate here for a lot of the men folk that are out there. So, where things just really just seem imbalanced and not fair. Example, I had a friend of mine that was in the military. He and his wife had purchased a home together. After he had gotten out of the military, he used his VA benefits to purchase a house. Well, she got the house, and now he has to continue pay the mortgage and just not get any of the equity or anything out of the house that he's been paying for the last 20 years. Like, how is that possible? Yeah, how is something like that possible?
Was that my client, or no? I'm kidding. That's not the first time I've heard of something like that.
Or just kind of just outlandish things where you've got a mother that's given custody, or equity in a home that has never worked, never had a job, but basically relinquishes custody, and the father has to pay child support even though he has custody of child. But I know that's child custody. We're going to get into that next week. Or the fact that he may have been awarded the home, but she refuses to take her name off the deed. What happens in a divorce decree when one person is awarded a home and then the other one is supposed to have their name removed after the divorce? What's that process like? Who's supposed to do what to get it removed?
Right. So let me start by saying, if the husband is my client, he got the short end of the stick. If the wife is my client, he got treated fairly. You understand what I'm saying? No. Um, having gone through my own, like I said, surprise unrequested divorce a while back, and having represented both men and women, I'll give an example of one situation where the wife started to cry on the witness stand and the judge stopped everything to bring her a tissue. And when the husband started to tear up talking about some medical issues of his that men would not want to be broadcast, the judge just looked like, move along, let's get going. Didn't give crap squat to this guy talking about ED and other health issues. And it was like nothing. And it's
Wow.
like, wow. I mean, to me, that showed certainly some bias. However, we're all biased in one way or in another, and sometimes we don't realize it, and it may not be intentional. And even what I just described may not have meant that she was going to give him a bad result. Oh, but she did. But it didn't necessarily mean that she was going to give him a bad result. So it's funny because some of the stuff you've brought up, I've seen happen. If there's a term called inception of title in Texas, and all that means, that's legalese to say, if you buy a house and you're single, it's your house, and you get
Mhm.
married and you get divorced, the ex-spouse does not necessarily get that house.
Mhm.
That other spouse might be able to make a claim for money that says, hey, our community property paid for the mortgage the last 10 years, but that spouse is not awarded the house. The court cannot do that.
Mhm.
However, I've seen the court do that, and apparently you have too,
Mhm.
your buddy. And so the problem with our legal system, and I'm not saying that I have the perfect solution, but a problem is a judge can do anything that she or he wants until somebody appeals the decision. And to appeal the decision is a minimum of $20,000, and it could be
Ooh,
$50,000.
Lordy.
That's after already spending 20,000 or 100,000 or 150,000 in attorney fees on one side or on each side, just to get to the point that now somebody wants to appeal it. So it's really even if you're super rich, it's still a lot of money. And
It is.
if you're a working person, that's an insurmountable amount of money to have to spend just to get what's right.
And
And it's unfortunate.
and generally when you appeal, are you going back before that same judge or are you getting a different judge?
So when you appeal, you are appealing to a justice court, like the First or the 14th Court of Appeals of Texas in Houston. It's 3 justices, and they're going to look at the record. You can't bring up new evidence. You have to only say, in court, the judge wouldn't let me present evidence that I own the house. In court, you tried to tell the judge, this is a trust fund, and the assets in the trust fund are not my clients, and you can't distribute it. And then when the judge does, as I've observed, then you have to go to the appellate court and say, this judge wouldn't let me bring stuff in. This is the stuff I was going to bring in. And maybe you can get the order reversed.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that and by the way, I've had a judge tell me I'm a human being like you are. There are days I'm going to make some bad decisions. There are days I'm going to be cranky, and and don't try me. And you know what? I appreciate his honesty, because that's true about we all on any given day, as nice as you are, Nia, I bet you could be cranky. What do you say?
Of course I can.
And I've been told on many days I can be cranky. So as nice as we are right now, something could happen tomorrow, and a person would go, wow, you're not as friendly as you were yesterday. Well, it's true with judges. So we got to give them grace. But there are some really bad decisions. If there weren't, then we wouldn't have a need for the appellate courts.
So And I understand what you're saying. I understand allowing a little bit of grace for bad days and things of that nature. But being that you are a presiding judge, if you know offhand that you are in a bad mood and don't try me and I may be swayed or just, you know, whatever, shouldn't judgment tell you, let me remove myself? Because right now is probably not the best time for me to make a decision about anything. Let me
Of
step back
course,
for a little
of
while
course,
and then come back to the table so that I could be fair and just.
of course, except now you're expecting people to have self-awareness.
Yeah, silly me. Silly
And
me.
and and confidence that admitting their frailty isn't going to come back and haunt them at the next election.
Mm, mm,
So I would rather have a judge do exactly what you just said. Hey, today was a bad day. I'm or you know, we're canceling all. I mean, maybe the judge doesn't even have to say it, just simply the court coordinator says everything's being canceled today and will be rescheduled in 3 weeks.
yeah.
But yes, you would like to think that that would happen.
Okay. Someone's asking a question. If they are disabled, are they able to get a divorce for free?
Well, disability, it, disability in and of itself has no bearing on whether they can get a divorce for free. It's are they economically unable to pay for it? And if they can't afford an attorney, they should contact Lone Star Legal Aid or any of the other legal aid places, depending on where they live, and
Mm,
see if they can be represented for free. And if they are what's the court, the law says, if they're indigent, then it's my understanding they could file for free and not even have to pay the court costs. But the court costs are cheap compared to the attorney costs.
and would they have to file for divorce on their own, or would they still have to go through an attorney to
Oh,
even do?
you have the legal right to file any lawsuit, pretty much that I'm aware of, without any attorney involvement. I highly recommend against it, and not for self-serving purposes, but to say, find legal aid society that can help you if possible. Find some of the law schools have clinics that they can that have student attorneys, meaning they're in law school, but they're certified to talk in court
Mhm.
under the supervision of an attorney professor. So if it's a religious cause, then there's different religious organizations, not religious organizations, but like First Liberty Institute. If it's a civil rights issue, maybe the ACLU might provide, depending on what the cause is. Unfortunately, in divorce, it's rare that you're going to get a public interest group like First Liberty or like ACLU to represent you in a divorce case. I don't believe they typically do that, though.
Okay. So when someone's going to even do divorce pro se to make sure that they are doing it correctly, what are the steps? Like, would I need to do this first? I need to make sure this is done, especially when it comes to being served by a process server or constable, responding to things when you don't have an attorney. What's that process like to make
So,
sure nothing gets lost or somebody say, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that, that kind of thing.
well, even with attorneys, there's mistakes that can be made, but the person whoever needs help should be able to go to the law library at the Harris County Courthouse building, or one of the buildings, or Montgomery County, or McLennan County, wherever people are that are watching this, and speak to the librarian and ask the law librarian and ask for a checklist of the steps that you need to take. They should have a checklist of what are the major steps to take.
Okay.
And the Texas Supreme Court has actually produced basically a fill in the blank petition for a divorce for people that cannot afford to hire an attorney.
Okay.
Problem is, though, when you're pro se, you don't know what you don't know. But the law libraries offer a tremendous amount of free resources, just not a lot of guidance on what some of those resources might mean. But they should have a checklist, though, of what steps to take. And, like, for example, serving on a wayward spouse that maybe has moved away, and you don't even know where that person is anymore. There's a whole separate process for filing for divorce against that type of person, versus the person that's communicating with you might sign off and say, yeah, let's go. Does that answer your question? Or
Yes, I was actually looking it up on the law library to see if I could find it so that I could include it in the resources when I send this out to everybody. I know sometimes, divorces aren't always, what do you call it? What's the word? Peaceful,
right.
manageable. When someone feels threatened or feel that they are in danger for any purpose, what's the process for that one spouse? Are they to get a protective order, or what does that one spouse
Sure.
do?
So what I tell clients is, pardon me, I tell clients, or talk to clients and understand their financial situation. If money is tight, which it is for most people, then and if they truly have been threatened by, and truly is in the eye of the beholder, but if they truly have been threatened by their spouse, or they've literally been beat up by their spouse, or any other horrible things, then I would go to the district attorney's office or the police department and file a complaint of family violence, and ask the district attorney's office to get a restraining order against the spouse. And that's done through the criminal process, which is a lot scarier to that bad actor than the civil process, because you're looking at record that will follow you forever if convicted, and it's free because taxpayers pay for it. But another way of doing it is asking for a protective order through the family law court, but you're going to pay your attorney the thousands of dollars it's going to take to go through that process. And there may be a reason to do both, but I would start with the criminal side if this is really a danger, if you think that person is a danger, because you're going to end up there anyway if they don't behave themselves. So that's where I would start, and it's free.
I'm not sure. I know you kind of touched on it, but I'm not sure if you actually answered this one. When you're dividing community property, but the after the divorce, it has been declared and decreed that this one spouse is now going to get the house in its entirety. How do you get the other one's name taken off? If there's something
Okay,
that needs to be done
sure.
afterwards, or how does it get removed?
Right. So there are many kinds of attorneys. There's two in particular that I want to just kind of compare and contrast. There's one attorney that says, hey, let's just focus on the big picture. It's going to be cheaper, it's going to be quicker, and it's easier to get the court to approve it. But it's going to have a lot of gaps. And so, as an example, you get the house, and he doesn't, or she doesn't, right? But there's not a whole lot of detail about how is this person going to get off the note, off not the note, but off the owner, the deed.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's another type of an attorney that might be a little more expensive, but he or she's going to be more detailed and says, okay, you're going to get the house, and here's what we're going to do. This person must sign this deed of trust and deed over the house. And if this person doesn't do it within 30 days of the signing of the order, then the person will have to pay $1,000 or $5,000 or some dollar amount in damages, liquidated damages for not performing, or we'll have to pay attorney fees to go back to court and the judge will make them sign the piece of paper. Or let's have everything that they need to sign and ask the court to order him to sign it right here in court. So am I making sense that
Yeah.
you can get, but if you get too bogged down in details, the judge might go, I'm not going to sign that. Or my example that I said, make the guy sign it right there in court. Chances are the judge won't do that because that guy still has the right to appeal the decision. But if it's an agreed order, and sometimes people go through mediation and they talk, which means a former judge or another attorney is a neutral, literally a neutral that says, husband, you screwed up like this, you need to do this. Wife, he may have screwed up like this, but he's agreeing to do some of this and some of that. That's pretty close to what you want. You'll spend more money in attorney fees to be right or to win. I would encourage you to sign off and agree to this the way it is right now, whatever this is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And
Is
in
it
that,
better?
one quick thing. So
I'm
in that case where everyone agrees to it, then if my client was the one that was going to get the house, I would include that I'll draft all the paperwork necessary for the other side to sign, and the other side needs to sign it within 14 days or 7 days or whatever of being presented that document. So this is all before the final decree is signed. So when it comes time to signing the final decree and the other side hasn't signed it, well, then that judge still has power over that wayward spouse.
Is it better to try to get a divorce or have everything kind of worked out in mediation before you actually go before a judge, or do you still have to go before the judge regardless? Or can it be done in mediation?
So, yeah, yes and no. Don't you love that lawyerly answer? It depends. So there's a term called a mediated settlement agreement. And if the mediator signs it, the two attorneys sign it, and the husband and wife signs it, then, and it covers if it covers everything, then the court has to sign that order exactly like it is. And some courts will require one of the parties at least to appear in court and say, yes, this is what we've all agreed to. Some courts will require just an attorney to say, yes, my client knows about this. I explained everything. The other side has agreed. See, we got the signatures. And the court will go, boom. I know of at least one court that, or judge that didn't require any of that. She's like, submit the signed mediated settlement agreement. I'm going to read it. If it's all in order, you're divorced. No one needs to come back to court. Each judge can kind of set their own boundaries on what they require.
There is no like list or something of what's supposed to be included in a divorce when you're talking to an attorney? Because I know it's better to kind of talk to a couple of different people or whatever, if this is what you're, if this is the process that you're going through, just to kind of see who's going to do what. But with a divorce, is there a standard set of this is what's going to be included in a divorce, what I'm supposed to be doing as the attorney versus how do I know that they're doing everything that they're supposed to? How does a client know what your attorney is actually supposed to be doing?
That's a good question. So the state Supreme Court has created, some basic forms that say, here's what will be in the divorce decree. You could look at that as an offset.
Okay.
You could go down to the courthouse and pull up, in some cases, divorce decrees and see what were in those. The State Bar of Texas creates some forms with what they think should be in a divorce decree. But I think you have to be a member of the State Bar to be able to access it directly, but your attorney can access it and pay a small fee. If the attorney leaves out anything that's required, the judge most likely will say, wait a minute, where is this or that? And the opposing counsel might also object. However, if your attorney leaves something out, like for example, you are supposed to pay $300 a month in child support, and your attorney screws up and puts you're supposed to pay $3,000 a month in child support, it's unlikely the recipient's going to go, oh, Your Honor, I've made a mistake here.
You're giving me too much money.
And yet, to me, that other attorney, if this was agreed, should have contacted the first attorney and said, hey, you made a mistake, I think. But you can bet that that attorney is not going to go to the judge and say, hey, he's overpaying my client.
Question here. If wife had to pay a debt which husband was ordered to pay, credit cards, for example, can the wife go to another court or a justice court, for example, to seek reimbursement from the husband?
So what I heard you to say is wife has a credit card, and let's just say it's $10,000. But the court said, husband, you must pay the $10,000. Husband doesn't pay anything. What does the wife do? The typical answer is she files an enforcement action in the divorce court and says, judge, you ordered him to pay the $10,000 and he didn't. Make him pay. And oh, by the way, make him pay my attorney fees for having to come down here to enforce the divorce decree. And then the judge has the ability to scold the other, the bad actor, order him to pay, threaten him with jail time or other punitive means such as sanctions. Not only were you supposed to pay 10, but now you're going to have to pay another 5 for being a jerk. They wouldn't use that legal term jerk, but you get my point.
Right.
I don't think that you can, and honestly, I'm not 100% certain, but I don't think you can go to justice court and say, hey, I got a divorce decree, enforce it. I'm 99.9999% certain there's no way you can do that. The only exception might be if you have a contract and they breach the contract and the contract is part of the divorce decree, there might be another court you could go to.
But in the meantime, if you've got the creditors don't care about who was supposed to pay in the divorce.
That's right.
So if you've got creditors harassing you, so let me go ahead and pay for it, even though I know my spouse was supposed to be the one responsible. I have to go ahead and pay for it so that I don't disrupt my credit. Then in that regards, do they go and seek reimbursement? Do they file suit? Do they,
It depends on how much money it is. If it's $500, you'd be crazy to hire me, any attorney, to go back and enforce a $500 deficiency, because you're going to pay
more in attorney's fees.
You're going to pay a minimum of 3 to 5 times that, if not multitudes of that. But if you have the money to pay for the attorney and you're trying to make a point, build a record that this is a terrible dude or dudette, then maybe it would be worth it. Probably you'd want to wait for a few more of those different items, and once it becomes real money, whatever real money means to somebody, then go to court. Because you never know. When you get in court, you never know what the judge, a great judge, you still don't necessarily know what that judge is going to do. You might think you're in the right, and the judge might go, really, we're here for $15? You're wasting my time over 15, making up a new number, dollars?
So, and I hope that answers the question that this participant just had here. If not, please, if you need more elaboration, then please feel free to unmute yourself and ask directly, or type it in the chat, and I'll be happy to read it for you.
Can I give my website address where if they want to follow up?
Absolutely. And let me put it in the chat here too. Because people that get the recording will also be able to see
Oh, good.
the chat.
And so it's Y like in yes, A, B like in boy, LON,
IABLON
LAW
LAW.
.com. So yablonlaw.com is my website.
Okay. I will definitely include that there. Is there an email address you want to include as well,
Sure,
or?
info, INFO at yablonlaw.com.
Got it. Okay.
Oh,
Another question that I had here.
yes.
Out of state, if someone is married in the state of Texas, but then another spouse moves out of state or what have you, where do you file the divorce? Or how do you, or if the person that moves wants to file the divorce, do they have to file the divorce or apply or file for the petition for divorce where they are, or do they have to come back to Texas to do it?
So there are appellate cases that deal with what's called jurisdiction.
Mhm.
There's courts all over the country that where people fight over this. So no matter what might be the clear answer, somebody could have a way of saying, no, it should be over here. But as a general rule, you have to be a resident of either you or your spouse need to be a resident in the state in which you're filing for divorce. So if you live in California and your spouse lives in Texas, neither of you can go to New York and file for divorce. It'd have to be either in Texas or California.
Okay.
And if I'm a resident of Texas and you're a resident of California, I'm going to file in Texas. But you can't just move to Texas from, say, Oklahoma and a week later file for
File
divorce
for divorce.
in Texas. You'd have to either wait several months or you would file back in Oklahoma. And when you have kids involved, it gets even more complicated, but it tends to be where the kids living would be a guideline.
So when you're doing that and you're trying to file for a divorce, say if you're in Texas but the spouse is in Louisiana, and you don't exactly know what the address is because you guys have now been
Right.
separated. How does that person that's in another state get officially served like they're supposed to, or
Right.
receive notice about the divorce?
So you would ask the court to, give you the petition. You'd file the petition and you would ask for the service to be given on Jim Smith. You think he's in Lafayette, Louisiana.
Mhm.
He might be in New Orleans. Heck, he might be in Tennessee even, right? Because in your example, you've lost contact.
Right.
And so you hire a process server in the county or the area in which you think this person lives. That process server might be a company based in Texas, and you just contact somebody here in Houston who then hires somebody in Louisiana or wherever. But let's say they can't find the person. Well, then you go back to court and you ask, can we do an alternative service, which could be by certified mail return receipt requested, but again, in this case, you don't know the address, right?
Right.
It could be by publication, meaning in newspapers where you think the person lives, as well as the county that you're in. There are some courts now that are actually letting you serve them through email and social media.
Mm.
Like if
Wow.
you can show that I can't find where this person is, but here's his Facebook page, and he's active on his Facebook page, and it is him. I've read of cases, I have not personally done this yet, but I've read of cases where you can file them, serve them through their Facebook page. That's a
Even
relatively new.
even though people are making up fake social media pages kind
Well,
of like all over the place, I mean, I could say that I'm you and put your picture up there and
right. But
nobody will ever know.
for most people, that's not the case. And boy, if I'm the attorney and I find out you're my client and you made up a Facebook page, of
Well,
your
that,
spouse to just to get around, I'm no longer going to be your attorney, right?
I mean, well, just flat out fraud. But I mean, where you would assume that that is that person's page because
Yeah.
people's accounts get hacked all the time, and people will then
Right.
start sending out friend requests for a completely different page that's not even theirs, or
I
that
understand.
happens. So
I'm not a cybersecurity guy, but I think that if you were married to this person, you'd be able to look at the website, the Facebook page or LinkedIn page and say, okay, those are real photos, lots of photos. Those are real posts. I remember that when he made that post, and if I think you could be pretty confident of the accuracy of it. Now, I couldn't be confident of the accuracy. And if it had very little detail other than a photo and 20 friends, then I'm going to say, yeah, that's probably,
probably not.
it was probably hacked. But
Mm.
but you do what you do. The court isn't going to make you stay married to a stranger. At some point, the court's going to say, okay, you're divorced. But then you got child custody issues and you got child support and property division. And but at some point, the court is going to say, yeah, you're divorced and you get this property and he gets that property. And since he's not here, obviously you're getting the kids. Different kids.
So what happens if there's some property that was not referenced or wasn't addressed in a divorce decree? Do you have to go back to court again, like, oh, we forgot about this property
Yeah.
that's in another state or something like that?
So it's my understanding, I have not personally dealt with that issue, but it's my understanding that the technically the property hasn't been divided and you'd need to modify your divorce decree to account for this new property that you forgot to include. What's more likely to be the case, though, is one spouse had a secret checking account,
Mm.
tell the spouse and hid it. And then the ex-spouse now finds out. Well, then if I were the attorney for the ex-spouse that found out, I would go back to court and say, hey, we just discovered that he has $10,000 or 50,000 or 5 million. And as punishment, we want the court to award all of it to my client because he committed fraud on the court, or she, whoever it is.
And how long would they have to, what's the time frame that they would have to go back and say, if it's discovered a year later, a couple of months later?
It's my understanding that the statute of limitations, meaning that the time that you have to file, is stopped until the day you discover the fraud. So let's say that the fraud happened 5 years ago and you discovered it today. Then you would have maybe a year or 2 years, depending on exactly greater detail than our example, to go back and try to enforce the order or to claim that this person committed fraud and you want the money.
Okay. Let me go back to another question in relation to the debt. What if you've got a spouse that has umpteen 10 different credit cards that you had no clue that they even got?
Right.
Would that other spouse still be legally responsible or liable for that debt that was incurred by the other spouse?
So if that other spouse applied for the credit card, got the credit card, used the credit card, and it was only in that other spouse's name, well, then generally that credit card goes with the spouse that signed up for it, incurred the debt, and so on. If that spouse applied and signed his name and signed your name and you had no clue about it, then that would be fraud. And your remedy would be asking the court to make the other side pay off that credit card immediately, to give you extra cash for you could pay off. Or another remedy could be suing your spouse for fraud in creating this credit card and trying to get the credit card company to take you off the note. Because
Mm.
if you're a victim of fraud, I don't believe that the credit card company can now hold you to the contract because you never had what they call assent to the agreement. You never had agreement to the agreement. You never
Mm.
gave consideration, meaning a promise for a promise or money for something. You're
Yeah,
a victim.
I've come across that. I've heard that too
Yeah.
In a couple of divorce, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I
Very.
believe that. So when you've got uh, a couple that has a joint bank account, and one spouse decides to go and take everything out of it,
What?
and then
No.
file it. Yeah, imagine that. Huh? That wouldn't possibly happen.
Can't
But
imagine.
if they go and completely clean out the accounts and then file for the divorce, what's the other spouse to do?
Well, as part of my answer to if I'm the victim and it's the other one filed the divorce, as part of my answer is to uh, and my counter petition suing for divorce as well is to ask the court to order that money to be returned or be distributed, to me, and I'm going to ask for a greater share of that money because the spouse that cleaned out the bank account was a bad actor.
Mm.
But I have seen a judge where a spouse cleaned out 60 to 70%, more than 60% of it. Well, let me start over. I've seen a judge where a case where the spouse took out less than 60, but more than 50% of the combined of the family checking account and didn't seem to be bothered by it at all.
Mm.
And I don't know whether that was because she didn't fully grasp the facts, didn't care. Story the attorney didn't present it well enough for the judge to be able to grasp the facts. Yeah, I can't say what was in her mind, but
Mm.
I saw where she did not penalize the other side. Please,
Would
anybody listening, this is not to encourage you to do that. Please don't do that because you're going to
again, not
spend,
legal advice.
well, not legal, not moral, not personal. I'm saying don't do that.
In this day and age where one the divorce rate is so much higher, um is it recommended that some form of prenuptial is already signed prior to every marriage nowadays?
Funny you asked that. So I am I think I'm a romantic or I was a romantic at heart. But the reality is if you have a prenup, you are okay, let me say it differently. The pro for having a prenup is it lets you and the spouse know this is what's going to happen if we get divorced. I'm going to get this, you're going to get that, and we're not going to fight over any of the, at least on the property through the moment that we signed this.
Mhm.
The prenup isn't necessarily, although it could, going to address all the things that could happen in asset accumulation or debt accumulation in the next 5 or 20, 50 years, right? But
Mhm.
at least it kind of, up to that moment, without a doubt, it gives you clarity. And it's a binding contract if it's done the right way. The con to that, though, is you're saying, I don't know, I'm not committed to this marriage
I don't trust you like
because
that.
I've got a parachute here of how I'm going to parachute out of this and keep all my money if you're the rich person in the family.
Right.
Um, I, but here's what I will say. If this is your second marriage, and if you have, and if, especially if you have kids and there's a huge wealth disparity, I think you'd be crazy not to have a prenup.
Yeah.
I hate to say that, but
What are some common mistakes that you see for when somebody is doing, say, divorce pro se, what's the biggest mistake that you see people make when they're trying to represent themselves and throughout the
Well,
divorce?
number one is you don't know what you don't know. That's a huge thing. But your lawyer doesn't know everything either. So he just or she knows maybe more than you do about the law. You hope. You hope, you know. So that's one point. Second point is it's emotional for you. If it's not, then something's not right because it should be emotional. Doesn't mean radical emotional, but it means it's sad. You were married to this person and now one of you or both of you no longer want to be living together and being married. How can that not have some kind of emotional trauma associated with it? But on a different level, even if you're an attorney, even if you're a family law attorney, most people would say don't be your own attorney because you know so much about the case that you can get bogged down in the facts and the emotions that led you to where you are. Whereas if I'm a disinterested attorney, I'm going to look at the case. I better believe in my client, but I'm going to look at making this number up 1,000 pages of facts, and I need to distill those facts into 1 or 2 pages. And I'm going to be able to do it more easily because I don't have the memory of how those facts played out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm not going to, when you're doing it yourself, you're reliving every single fact that you put on that page. Whereas I am going to look at what you wrote down and I'm going to put it together in a story and hopefully tell your story in a way that the judge likes. The other, do you want to give you a couple more reasons, concerns about being
No,
pro
no,
se?
no, go ahead before
So
I,
another thing is I'll use an analogy. I was talking to my brother today about this. If you're managing your investments and you're picking your individual stocks and bonds and you have $1 million or $100,000, you're crazy not to hire someone to manage it unless you just enjoy it. Because
Mm,
the amount of time that you're going to spend to get up to speed and to keep up with all the changes going on is a tremendous amount. And it's no more than if you were managing 50 million. The person managing 50 million is going to need to keep up the same as you managing 1 million if it's just your money. But the amount of time you spent for the amount that you saved is not worth it.
mm,
And I hired an attorney. I ran out of money to pay for an attorney. I ended up representing myself. I ended up going to paralegal school. And after 5 years or more, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to law school. So if I could have found the attorney that I'm trying to be, I would have never even contemplated going to law school.
mm, mm. That says a
I don't know if
lot
that makes
about
any
the
sense,
attorney.
but what's that?
That says a lot about that attorney.
Well, but I mean, I just couldn't, either I couldn't afford the ones or they didn't understand me. They wanted to tell me how it was rather than collaborating with me as a business owner, entrepreneur who's having to make all kinds of decisions. They just wanted me to be stupid and just sit there and do whatever they say. Some, and
Gotcha.
you know,
How long legally are you supposed to be married before a spouse is entitled to benefits that you actually have paid into or that you have received? Example, if you've worked on a job for 15 years and you've got retirement or other benefits from that job, something happens to you, but you've only been married to this person for a year, or and then you divorced or whatever.
mhm.
How long is there a period of time that someone has to be married to a spouse before they are entitled to like retirement benefits and you know, any kind of annuities or anything like that
Sure.
that they may actually have?
So first of all, you and your spouse can agree to anything if y'all agree, right? Pretty much anything.
Mhm.
If you're asking a court to make the decision, then the court can make mistakes, but the way it's supposed to work is whatever the retirement account was worth the day before marriage, let's just say that was 100,000.
Mhm.
At a minimum, that 100,000 belongs to the worker. And if you've been married for 1 year, then and you contributed $10,000 that year, then at a minimum, $10,000 plus the interest it earned would be community property to be split in half.
Mm.
If you're married for 35 more years, that doesn't change that original $100,000. That's still going to be, if you can prove it to the satisfaction of the judge, and there's a big if, then that 100,000 should stay with you no matter what, including the interest that it earned at least until the marriage. Now, I honestly don't remember, but I think interest earned after marriage would be community property, but I could be mistaken on that.
Kind of going through some other questions here, making sure that I address everything.
And there are in the law, it's sad, but there are exceptions to most every rule. So please nobody take anything I said as, that's a fact, and it's always applicable no matter what the situation is. There's A, I could be mistaken since I'm just going off memory, and B, there could be extenuating circumstances that change my answer.
Okay, so you definitely, if you want to do divorce pro se, you definitely want to consult with the Houston Law Library for the different forms and a checklist and things like that. If you're trying to represent yourself, when contacting an attorney, I guess I would assume you would want to talk to a couple of different attorneys and see who you feel most comfortable with.
Yeah, you might want to talk to one, you might want to talk to five. There's a joke that I don't believe is totally true, but there's a joke that if you're in a small town, talk to the top 3 divorce attorneys so that maybe your spouse won't be able to hire them because of a conflict. But I think that's more folklore than reality.
Definitely not for Houston, for as many attorneys as there are in
Yeah.
Houston. That doesn't apply.
Don't do that in a small town either. I'm just light of it. But sometimes you talk to one attorney and you either got good recommendations from them or you just have a good vibe about them, and you don't need to talk to a bunch of others. But definitely don't talk to one attorney and not feel good about that attorney and then hire that attorney without talking to several other attorneys.
Yes. Let me see what else there that we have missed. I believe that's it. Those are all the other questions that I have.
All right. Did I pass my bar exam?
Absolutely.
Yay.
Thank you very much. I believe they've got you on the list to do another presentation later this year, don't they?
They might. I try to volunteer in the subject matters I'm interested in.
I thought I saw your name on a couple of different ones, but if not,
Do you have some openings do you have any openings for later this year?
we can talk with Ashley because at the Bar Association, because they're the ones that arranged our Tuesday,
Okay.
our community empowerment workshops for our Tuesday law ones, and we can certainly see if there's an opening for something else. If there's another area of expertise that you'd like to volunteer, then please definitely let us know whatever that subject matter might be, and we can definitely see about getting that on the schedule. So I definitely appreciate you taking the time out this afternoon out of your busy schedule. Just kind of wanted to reiterate to our participants that the information that we do present, it is from volunteer attorneys that do take time out of their schedule to make sure that this kinds of information get out to the community. And we certainly appreciate that. Because without you guys volunteering your time, we certainly wouldn't be able to actually pay an attorney to be here out of your billable hourly day.
Wait, I don't get paid for this?
I'll get you lunch.
All right.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark. We really appreciate you. For the participants that are joining us today or that were not able to join us today, the recording of this session will be emailed to everyone along with the contact information for Mark, and some of the resources that I will attach that he spoke of will be included as well for all of you to go back and get more information about If you are joining us or kind of tuned in late, you can watch the session on our Facebook page, as well as I will send you the link to our YouTube channel that you can go back and watch the presentation as well. Again, information that has been provided here today is for educational or informational purposes only. It is not to be considered legal advice. However, we do encourage you to reach out to our legal service partners or to Mr. Yablon if you are in need of specific assistance or have particular questions that he may be able to assist you with. So with that being said, you all have a wonderful remainder of your afternoon. Thank you all for joining us again, and we will see you all next time.
All right. Thank you very much. Take care,
Bye-bye.
everybody.